Hey guys, Courtney from WooRank here. I'm here again with my pal Deepak Shukla from Pearl Lemon. Hey Deepak.
Hello. Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Nice in yellow.
Yeah, a lot of yellow today. So everyone is aware, WooRank, we just completed some really cool research about backlink experience, bad backlink experience in particular, in the e-commerce space. And today we're going to talk about maybe what potential financial impact or bad user experience that could have. So Deepak, I'm just going to go through a little bit of our research methodology, how we came to the conclusions that we came
Okay.
to, and then we're going to chat it up. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Awesome. Let's hear it. I'm excited.
Cool. All right. So, since there are 2 to 3 million e commerce companies in the world, and almost 1 million of the more than 22 million websites that WooRank reviews is an e commerce site, we got a little bit curious. What percentage of backlinks on the web don't meet user expectation or intent? So, here's what we did we found 1,000 e commerce websites with similar Alexa ranks and the
Yep.
same number, more or less, of product pages. Half the sites that we analyzed had 50,000 backlinks or more, 60% had 100,000 or more, 75% had 170,000 or more, and 5% of the websites that we analyzed had more than 1 million backlinks. So, on average, each domain's link profile that we analyzed had 20% unique target URLs. So, drum roll, brrr, that gives us a grand total of 975,179 unique backlinks, pointing to 154,728 unique URLs. So,
Okay.
are you with me
Wow.
still?
I am with you. I'm with you. That's a pretty impressive roll call. Well done.
Thank you.
WooRank and you.
Okay, so after that, we took those target URLs and we crawled them using our own site crawl, following the links until we reached a page that returned a 200, a 400, or a 500 HTTP status.
Okay.
So, our big finding in doing all of this research with all of these backlinks is that we found in total 18% of these backlinks are sending users to a page that they do not expect to land on.
It's 1 in 5 people, isn't it?
Right, yeah, that's a humongous number. So we were actually pretty astonished by this. And it's something that e-commerce store owners don't necessarily know is going on with their sites. So that's why we're here today. To briefly explain how we got to those numbers, 12.2% of e-commerce backlinks are sending users to a 404 status.
Okay. Okay.
And then if we look at the 40% of the links that we found that had at least one redirect, more than 10% of those redirects are sending users to the homepage with no explanation instead of the page they want us to land on. So if we recalculate that math, which the smart people on the development team did, not me, if we recalculate
Give me the numbers.
and we look at the original numbers, simplify it a bit, that means that the 18%, that's how we landed on that 18% number of e-commerce backlinks are not sending users where they want to go.
Okay. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay, so now that we've laid the groundwork here, so Deepak, now can we maybe potentially talk right now about why this is problematic not only for the users, but why this is problematic as well for e-commerce store owners?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's amazing research, by the way. 18% is actually, I'm aware of this broadly being a problem that, redirects are always complicated for stores. Often, for example, stores that are built on like Magento, a lot of the Shopify guys will typically have maybe a maximum of maybe 30 to 50 product variation. So you could do it kind of manually. But when you're looking at developing kind of hard coded redirects based upon stores that run at scale, people that sell like manufacturing companies that sell kind of parts, for example, will have this issue of how do you deal with it directly. And it's certainly it's that segue, but with the kind of commercial minded e-commerce owner versus the SEO person who's saying, hey, I know that you are, as you quite rightly said, a huge proportion of people are either doing probably like one of four things. Number one, they're doing, as you said, a redirect to the homepage. Number two, they are allowing it to land on a 404 page saying, sorry, whatever it might say. Number three, they're potentially then just not doing anything and it's a broken link. And then number four, they're maybe redirecting because they're trying to be smarter, redirecting maybe to a product page or to something else, like another page within their kind of internal site linking structure. So I'd say that broadly speaking, in the ideal world, okay, let's talk about this a little bit, and let's go back to kind of the layman's terms. If I go into a shop because I know that that's a shop that sells mangoes and lemons, and I come in looking for a mango, but instead I get to where I think the mango aisle is going to be, and they send me along a journey to another place where I think, well, okay, they're like, please keep going, sir, you're on your way. And then I end up seeing a bunch of lemons. It's going to kind of piss me off because I'm going to be like, well, this is nice, and I'm aware that you maybe sell lemons because I'm aware of what you do, but I came in looking for mangoes. And as you know, as it is when comparing apples and oranges, the commercially minded business owner who runs an e-commerce store is probably trying to eke out that additional piece of revenue, because they may look at their bottom line, and when you do this at scale, they'll say, aha, that this is a broken product page because our melons have sold out. So we then redirected them to Mary's lemons. I say lemons because I saw your yellow background first thing I thought of, and I said melons because of your red cardigan. So I was like, oh, melons. Yeah, it's funny visual cues. And they may look at their bottom line from an e-commerce tracking perspective and say, but Deepak, I've just eked out like $17,000 of additional revenue, depending upon the numbers that we're talking about. But I made some money, Deepak. And of course, the difficulty with that is number one, thinking of the kind of bad user experience and how that impacts ultimately dwell time. Dwell time refers to the amount of time that a user spends on a page, and Google will look at that. The way that Google will look at that is by determining when the URL structure, or the link rather, will change from when you go onto a page to when you either come off, thus determining on average, the time spent on page. And that will then indicate to Google that, cool, this is a page that user is interested in and or is looking for. And invariably, if I find these lemons, I'm kind of just going to get out of the shop. And on a small scale, it might not have much of an impact. But when you start doing this at scale, and this is the big e-com guys, this becomes a problem because Google sees that your ultimately dwell time reduces and your bounce rate increases, and ultimately it's not in Google's interest to serve up content that's ultimately going to negatively give a negative user experience. So this is the problem with the redirect to a different product in general. Now, the second element of it is that someone might say, well, Deepak, okay, cool. I definitely don't want to send them to a broken page. So the reason that I've sent them from my mangoes to my lemons, because, there's still stuff that you consume. There's still consumables. So they're still within the same category, is because, I think this is the best option. So what happens when you do a 301 redirect? Because this is typically what people are doing. Ultimately, a 301 redirect is a fancy word for telling Google that nothing's changed apart from the URL. It's the same stuff. But of course, as we know, when you do that at scale, it's really invariably not the same stuff. So the default option is for the business owner that's just thinking of, I want to keep people on site. And it's not a bad thing. You do want to keep people on site. They'll redirect them to the homepage, as you said. So what does happen, of course, is a 301 redirect passes on maybe, I think the recent report said something like 85% of the link equity, but you're sending people to a page that's ultimately different to the page, to the original page. So this has an impact, a significantly negative impact when done at scale, because then Google then from that proceeds to believe that, well, the yourshop.com/mangoes contains ultimately content that is irrelevant to that actual page or irrelevant to mangoes. So what Google will then do ultimately is something a little bit akin to a de-indexing process, where also on that mangoes page, any other, or by association, Google will assume, well, most of this content might then be irrelevant. So there's almost a little bit of a de-indexing process where a lot of the links that you had built up on that page begin to get lost. So this isn't a problem that just happens in isolation, and this becomes a big problem when you redirect at scale to your homepage, because then you're going to begin impacting other stuff, because Google's getting confused. You're like, well, you're sending 1,000 people a week, dude, from a mangoes page to your lemon homepage. So, well, I'm confused, so I'm just going to kind of start de-indexing stuff. And this varies on a case-by-case basis, but what is uniform is that if that does happen at scale, then you'll ultimately hit your SEO rankings. And the problem that a lot of commercially minded agency owners, e-commerce owners, you might not see that happen for the first 2 months, and you might just see yourself making money that you think is being lost because it doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen. This is what happens. And then the other thing that people will do to anticipate some of the other questions is that they'll be like, right, I'll redirect it to a category page. So, right, I'm in the business of mangoes, right? And I want to redirect it to the mangoes page. And in the instance of mangoes, it probably could work to a relative to a better degree than the homepage, right? Broken link is just bad in general. I don't think that probably needs to be covered. The redirect to the homepage will ultimately have less relevance than a category page, right? But when done at scale, still, it's just not really a wise idea. When you redirect to a category page, in the instance of melons, we're probably going to get a 70% perhaps relevancy score, let's call it, right? Where 70% of the content from the individual mango product page to the mango category page is useful. So for some people that might, work as a potential option. Again, it's still 30% of your link equity being lost. So people might think, okay, Deepak, so what you're telling me is I need to send it to the category page. No, I'm saying that you will still lose some of your link equity because it's still going to be slightly different unless it's very similar content. But then we've got the issue of what they call doorway content or thin content, in that you've got 6 different pages that ultimately have very similar content minus a couple of keywords, but they're ultimately the same thing. Which is why it makes sense to try and actually rank category pages, because then from the category pages, a user can navigate to their own product pages themselves. And that's what happens with e-commerce stores when you've got like a yellow t-shirt that's outranking the green, red, and blue. And you're like, I want people to find all of my t-shirts. And you're like, well, Google is getting confused because, which is something we can come on to. But then to be honest with you, everyone who's listening is probably thinking, well, you're just confusing the hell out of me. Problem after problem after problem after problem, right? What's the solution? Google does not negatively view 404 pages. It's not the case. Google 404 pages is just as a way of, in the ideal world, you'll send someone who's looking for a mango to an identical page that's selling a mango that's either extremely similar or basically the same thing. Companies that have an engineering capacity such as Amazon are able to do such things whereby they'll do redirects, and it'll ultimately be, you're looking for a men's embroidered shirt by Waltons. We've got a men's embroidered shirt by Birchman. And it's, for the user, I'm like, well, this is almost the same thing. This is practically the same thing. Great. So it doesn't interrupt the experience. And that's quite well. This is complicated for people to do at scale because of the level of engineering perhaps involved. So 404 pages can work. The problem that most people think of is that, a 404 page can just be, hey, we're out of stock in that product at the moment, but here's maybe a couple of products that you might like instead.
Exactly. And yes, so I will just briefly explain to you why we even decided to do this research in the first place. That, you're scrolling on Pinterest, and this particularly happened to me, scrolling on Pinterest. You see a cabinet that you like or whatever from IKEA, which is specifically the example we used in our research piece, and you click on it, and it brings you to the homepage. When you land on the homepage, you're given no explanation why you're there. You're not being told that it's out of stock, that it's no longer being produced, that this is a product that they had in 1999 and they're never going to make it again. You're not given any similar products to it. And you just end up getting, at least I did, I was like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. This is so frustrating. So what you're saying here is that there are better options to sending people just to the homepage, right? Like an explanation of sorts.
Absolutely. I think that for those guys who have too many products to really send someone to a very similar product, and Deepak, it's so complicated to do that because then a different product changes and there's all this engineering that happens. 404 pages that you could build out perhaps on a category level based upon, right, this is the 404 page that I'll use based upon a mango /URL structure, should be simpler to kind of code in, depending upon, again, of course, the variations. But broadly speaking, the most practical advice I can give to the agency owners, to the e-commerce owners, is that a 404 page that says, hey, I know that you were looking for X product. So sorry, it's not in stock right now. but here's a couple of options that you might like based upon, what it's the stuff that you see on Amazon ultimately, and and it's achievable kind of on a smaller scale. That is the best thing to do. Google does not penalize 404 pages. It's a myth, and people sometimes worry about it. And also, 404 pages are still an opportunity to add something quirky, add something irreverent. And as you said, it creates a bad user experience. There's frustration. It decreases dwell time. It increases bounce rate. It confuses Google. There's kind of lots of negative things that happen when you redirect to homepage or even potentially category page at scale. And potentially, it's not just a user experience. It's affecting the SEO and all your other stuff, because Google will begin looking at it and saying, well, hey, this page is not serving appropriate content, so we may just de-index some of the anchor text or the links or the properties that are on that page, meaning you're like, hey, my property, my links are disappearing, or rather my keywords are disappearing. What's going on? And this is sometimes something that e-commerce or owners or multi-location sites that perhaps do doorway a thin content approach us and saying, we've got rankings that are nothing to do with the keyword that we're beginning to look at are being affected. So Courtney, you're completely right. I think the IKEA explanation is kind of hits a nail on the head, especially from the consumer experience of it.
Yeah, and let's also just continue on with the user experience part of it. Let's say, whoever's listening to this, Tom, who owns the mango shop, just can't be bothered to care about the SEO impact of these redirects, these redirect chains, the dwell time. He doesn't care. Let's talk about what he really cares about. Tom, let's talk about the money you're losing with this.
Absolutely. Tom, I mean, Tom, this is a message for you, buddy. You want to build revenue in your company. You've got your margins, you've got your returns, you've got your growth. You need to do this because it's going to ultimately help you sell mangoes for the next 6 months. Sending people over to lemons seems like a nice idea, but these guys aren't looking for lemons. And while some of them might buy, at some point, the ticket inspector or the licensing inspector is going to come over and say, you're sending people to a place that's irrelevant, so therefore everything around it is irrelevant, and they're going to just add a red flag around your stuff. You won't see that happen today, but it will come. So, if revenue and growth, of course, is important to you, then this is important, and it's something that you should look at and go to an out-of-stock page right now that that probably exists, and see what the experience of it is yourself. Imagine you're looking for, the mangoes, see where you end up, and that'll tell you to a degree what you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And there's a lot of things that we're talking about now that we didn't necessarily touch on our research piece, like the dwell time and certain SEO elements like that Google is going to pay attention to. It's not necessarily just about a user gets frustrated and leaves. There's also other implications on the Google side of things by adding these redirects. So that's a really, really great point. Okay, absolutely. So let's move on to the more practical things. What can retailers do about this? Like, if Tom is now understanding that this is an issue, something he needs to fix, what would you suggest he does?
Absolutely. I think that depending upon, action it, of course, is the answer. And as every business owner will say, well, Deepak, what is the quickest way to get this done in the cheapest way possible that's going to get me the best result, right? And I'd say that depending upon the complexity of your store, it does need to be treated carefully. You need to look at what happens at scale, depending upon the amount of products or the amount of categories. If you're a store with over 100,000 kind of SKUs, and it's going to require a little bit of engineering, but it's something that's really worth working on. And I'd say, day one, I'd say, using, for example, using WooRank, have a look at your backlink profile. You could have a look at, where your broken links or the redirects do occur, and start by looking at things at a category level. So just look for the big wins. The practical side of it is that you need to do a little bit of kind of coding to ensure, depending upon the kind of store that you have, to ensure that if it's mangoes, you're sending everybody to a 404 page that's potentially focused upon mangoes. But I might be getting too complicated. Tom, if you're just interested in results, build a fantastic 404 page depending upon the amount of categories that you have. So if you have 10 categories of products, build 10 404 pages for those categories with, for example, perhaps some of the best-selling items within those categories, and say, hey, we're so sorry we're out of this, but since you're looking for melons in general, here are some of our best-selling melons. Or if you're looking at men's shirts, here's some shirts that we, people like. And that's, to be honest with you, a really solid start that'll ensure that you're providing your users with an explanation saying, we're so sorry, we're out of stock. We're so sorry, we're working hard as we can.
Exactly, because with user experience, you do, like, in SEO, we do tend to sometimes forget that the user is a person because we're playing so much to Google algorithms. But you really do, especially in the e-commerce space, remember that your customer is a human being and they want to have the same experience with an online store that they would in a shop. That if they went to this mango and lemon shop in person, went to the cashier would tell them, I'm so sorry, we're out of stock. So why wouldn't you do that on your website? Why wouldn't you explain it to them?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's dwell time, there's bounce rate, there's a possibility for negative reviews when people start writing saying I've had a bad experience. There's a significant ripple effect that could come as a consequence of broad brush redirects that don't really enhance the user experience. So I'd say one of the other interests is that it's a kind of a ticking time bomb, and you need to defuse it to make sure that you can kind of keep up with everybody else who is aware of this. Because whilst you might be too busy, I can guarantee you there'll be other SEOs or there'll be other companies that have internal SEOs that are working on this stuff, and you'll only find out about it after the fact when you go to an SEO, because you've had something that's been de-indexed, or you're like, my revenue's taken a hit. Why is my revenue taking a hit? And we want to kind of get ahead of that. So you're completely right.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just recap. Bad backlink experience is bad for the user. You guys, fix it. Any final thoughts from you, Deepak?
I think that really does sum it up. And at a practical level, whether it ends up, whether it's with WooRank, however you deem to get it fixed, it's just something. The easiest way to look at it is if you're an agent, if you're an e-commerce owner. I keep saying that word, agency. Sorry, guys. If you're an e-commerce owner, is go through that experience yourself on your own shop and kind of make sure that it gets fixed. So I add only what we've already discussed.
Absolutely. And guys, I'm going to leave a link to all of our research, the methodology, all of the graphs that we have, and also solutions, plus the actual number that we came up with, a potential revenue you're losing with your lost clicks. So
there you go.
I'm going to leave that as a link in the description. So be sure to check that out if you're curious. And Deepak, again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really informative, really helpful, and I hope that it resonates with some e-commerce owners.
Fingers crossed, guys. Thank you so much, Courtney. And of course, the developers at WooRank, you guys have been working hard. You got some numbers. Love it.
All right. Thanks, Deepak. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.